What does joining Hip Hop Now's Patreon mean? It means supporting the kind of hip-hop content that keeps you updated on the latest hip-hop news and moves. It means supporting the production of content like That Time in Hip Hop and Hip Hop Now Reviews. It means you care about the conversation and preservation of hip-hop music and culture. Hip Hop Now Patreon supporters get access to bonus content, merchandise, and more. Support the movement. Become a supporter of Hip Hop Now podcast today at patreon.com/hiphopnow.
Coming up this week on Hip Hop Now podcast, Biggie 50, the Notorious B.I.G. is officially the king of New York. Prodigy's solo music returns to streaming services, plus bonuses, and no more behind bars for bars. But it's complicated. Let's do it.
Let's get right to the business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic album.
Come to Hip Hop Podcast. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip-hop, music, and culture that happen throughout the week. This podcast, of course, is brought to you by the producers over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would like to become a supporter of this podcast, or you just want to know what is that all about, we have several levels that you could check out to support. All of the proceeds given by those that support the podcast are poured back into the production of the podcast. Bonus content, all that good stuff. So the place you visit, patreon.com/hiphopnow. After this episode, go to the description of this episode and click on the link and check it out. And one quick thing that is new out in these streets, so you know, like I know, Kendrick Lamar has released his final album on TDE called Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. It was trending all week. People talking about it, people holding sessions, podcasters doing reviews. I did a review, I did a video review, impressions, all that good stuff. You can check out my review, whether it's on YouTube, as I play NBA 2K22, my career, or within this very podcast stream is my review, sans the video gaming. But nevertheless, subscribe to all of it to stay in line with content and to get my thoughts on what I think about the album and what it means and whether he's King Kendrick and all that good stuff. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, Complex, sometimes, djbooth.net, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Let's get right into the business, though. So recently, there was a reunion of sorts between the Outsiders, John Forte, and the Fugees as part of a Cowboys Festival performance. If you don't know, you like, well, who are those people? Well, I'm going to just drop a few names. Rod Digger, right? Outsiders. The Fugees, you know them. John Forte, you may remember him. But it was pretty dope. And there was a video that I saw on Instagram that Rod Digger posted of them kind of warming up before the show. It was pretty dope considering, you know, the history there. And I'm gonna get on my soapbox a little bit, just as a person who, you know, remember those days. As much as I would like a Fugees album today, I think the time has passed. Unless somehow they get the proper production and they're able to create something that will capture that nostalgia for people from the 90s who remember when the Fugees were on top, who remember the Outsiders, who remember John Forte was pretty dope on the mic before he got locked up. And all these people are still around. But so much time has passed. I just don't know if we want that. Now, one caveat is the fact that I think it depends on the production. And when I say that, there's ways it can go really well and there's ways it can go really bad, right? I don't know what Wyclef and team have produced in recent years. I can't say they're not hot as they used to be because I don't know what they record. But I know back in the days, their style of production was on point and there was an appetite for it. I don't know if that exists today. I don't know if it's worth trying to capture that. But if there's one thing to note when you talk about success and kind of harnessing what people like about an artist or an artist's sound, but they don't want it to sound dated, but they want a nostalgia reminder, what Hit Boy is doing with Nas is a prime example. Now, I said it a while back. I said when Nas dropped Life is Good, this is the type of music he should make, nothing else. King's Disease series so far has been a lot like Life is Good in a lot of ways, but almost better because it's not all these producers and Nas working with this one producer who is perfect at giving him the right beats and probably in some cases the right direction and what he records. And they've released 3 projects together and none of them have been whack. And for somebody like Nas, he's kind of had that career where he'll have a really dope album and then he'll have a really so-so to forgettable album. And then in a couple of cases, he may have a terrible album and then he'll triumph back and everybody will be happy and he'll have another dope album. But with Hit Boy, that was like King's Disease 1 was like his comeback. So, and he's been on a streak. So that's a way it can go right. A way it can go wrong, and I'm not talking on paper, is Black Star with Madlib, which I did some quasi review of it previously. And it sounds like something that should work, that should be dope, that should be the next step for Black Star, but it doesn't really feel like an extension of that group, which is difficult to do when it's been like 20-something years since those two put out an album together. And one last example of it working. I know some Tribe fans don't like it and some other Tribe fans think it's cool or love it or think it's good. And that's the Tribe Called Quest last album, the Thank Me Later joint. We got it from here, Thank Me Later, something like that. That's a prime example of taking a sound that is familiar to the group and upgrading it just a little bit to make you feel like this is a Tribe album if it was released today. So I don't know who could provide that for the Fugees, right? Maybe Wyclef and Pras can do that. You know, maybe that production team of people from back then could do that. Maybe they got to bring Salaam Remi back, you know. I don't know. Maybe they work with Hit Boy. It really seems like Hit Boy can get with particular artists and just give them what they need as far as, you know, the proper production. Who knows? I'm not advocating for him to do that, but you see what I'm saying. So it would be dope. But if it happens, it happens. Who knows? One thing that happened recently was that a bill was passed that a lot of hip hop artists, in particular gangster rap artists, you know, hardcore artists who like to talk about crimes and guns and stuff, and some of which who have talked about it, talked about some real situations like Bobby Shmurda. Well, there was a bill passed. You could read the article on hiphopdx.com that, let's check it out. Earlier this week, hip hop secured a small victory against this trend, which is people getting locked up for their rhymes, when the New York State Senate passed the Rap Music on Trial bill, which prevents prosecutors from using lyrics in court. The bill had received support from rappers such as Jay-Z, Meek Mill, Big Sean, Fat Joe, Yo Gotti, and Killer Mike. Now, this is extraordinary Because contrary to popular belief, most rappers don't do the stuff they talk about. And in some cases, they're, writing about someone else's story. In other cases, they're writing about things they did years ago. But in recent years, some rappers have gotten arrested based off of things in their lyrics, like Bobby Shmurda, that allude to things. But it's not just you rapping about a situation and the police kicking in your door, to take you to jail because of a story you told. But probably more so when a rapper's on trial and a prosecutor wants to paint a picture of who you are, and they go to your music to say, here he is right here saying how many people he would murder. Here he is right here saying how many bricks of coke he sold and what he did with it. And in a lot of cases, it's extremely biased to do that, because I've said it time and time again on this podcast. Those of you outside of hip hop, I welcome you to this podcast because you're curious. But I'm going to tell you like this. Hip hop is not that different from a book, from a movie, from a television show. It's all about genres. It's all about what you like. It's all about your personal taste. My personal taste, I like action movies. I like mafia movies. I like abstract movies. That's really reflected in the hip hop sitting in my, library of music. And that's not it. Some people only like the gangster stuff, so they only want to hear gangster rap and hardcore lyrics and criminal bars. Some people only like conscious rap, positive rap, and that's all they listen to. Some people listen to, I know they don't like to be called Christian rap, so let's call it spiritual rap. Some people like hip hop, but that's the only kind they listen to. None of those things are better than the other, because they all come in the form of entertainment. And we know they can provide a little bit more. Now, we ain't gonna make this the whole episode, but I will say this. I'm not saying that there isn't a generation that raps about what they're actually doing. That is a fact. But it's not everybody. And therefore, we know if any prosecutor knows they could easily win a case based off the stereotypes pointed to in the direction of hip hop, to say, here he is killing everybody. Most juries and people outside of hip hop are going to take it to the bank. And that's terrible. So if you in NY, you good. Everywhere else, we're going to have to work on it, because it's not really that good. For those who don't know, Joey Badass has a new album finally on the way called 2000. He talked to, I think this was exclusively hiphopdx.com. Well, actually, they have a story on it. But if you remember, his first project was titled 1999. Joey Badass said this about his upcoming album, 2000. If 1999 was about, he said this on Instagram, by the way. No, actually on Twitter. If 1999 was about a kid from Brooklyn, New York, trying to make it big and put his friends on, 2000 is about the same kid who's now a man on the other side of the fence. Similar vibe, different perspectives. 1999 was growing up in NY. 2000 is glowing up in NY. 2000 is 1999's bigger and richer brother. And then he put a laughing emoji. The album was announced on May 12th, and he has a tour going on, which I think is near around the time the album is released. But nevertheless, the album 2000 from Joey Badass is releasing on June 17th via Columbia Records. I'm going to tell you like this. We talk a lot about Kendrick having a streak of really good albums to great albums. I'm going to tell you like this. Joey Badass too. I think he had one slip up. right? He had one. 1999, to most people who liked it, is dope. Summer Nights joint was dope. Then he put out an album and tried to, get away from the boot camp sounding music and be a little bit, not necessarily pop, but a little bit more mainstream. And I felt like he didn't sound comfortable to me. The music didn't sound comfortable. Then he put out that album, American Badass, which I think, and I tell people all the time, and I might do an episode like currently, like criminally slept on albums of the modern age. Like classic material, but criminally slept on. I think Joey Badass's album, American Badass, was outshined because To Pimp a Butterfly sort of did what that album did before it had a chance to do it. But to me, Joey Badass album is a different vibe. For those who can't get into Kendrick's kind of eclectic style and switching flows and different types of beats and different types of genres of music, all meshed together as a gumbo, but you like the messages on To Pimp a Butterfly, Joey Badass's American Badass was a Black Lives Matter style album without being too preachy. It was really dope. And now he got this album coming out. So I am absolutely interested in checking it out. Speaking of albums you should check out, Prodigy's solo catalog has now returned to streaming services. For those who maybe you don't own these albums physically, maybe you don't own them digitally, but you always get mad when you go to listen to your favorite streaming service and you're limited on Prodigy's solo albums. Well, now all of them are back, including the mixtapes that were released that you should really look into checking out, because you want to talk about slept on. What were they called again? RIP 1, 2, and 3. It's 3 different projects. It's mostly Prodigy rapping with other people, so it's a lot of features, but it's really dope. Some of the volumes are doper than the other, but that's not the point. But with that also, right? So when you go to your favorite streaming service and say, "Oh, finally, man, I'm about to go in and just listen, Albert Einstein, all of these joints, just go in and Prodigy it up." Well, they also announced a posthumous album from Prodigy. Now, I've been waiting patiently for this, because the thing is, right, obviously, we all wish that Prodigy and other rappers were still here. But similar to my feelings about Nipsey, right? Nipsey died not too long after releasing Victory Lap. There has to be more music for a new album. But we haven't heard anything, and that probably has to do with, his estate and things of that nature. And we could wait, especially if they have something. We could wait. I can wait. But the one thing that kind of used to bother me was like Prodigy's music. Like there's no Mobb Deep album that was being worked on, that we haven't heard. There's no solo project that Prodigy was done with, or 1 or 2, because Prodigy was doing a lot of music. Around the time he died, he was doing a lot of music, man. He was featured on a lot of projects. He was active, you know what I'm saying, as far as creating music, creating his own albums. He put out a bunch of albums people didn't even know he put out with different subject matter. He was working. So it made me think man, I'm pretty sure when Prodigy passed, it wasn't just those mixtape joints, those RIP joints that he had in the can. And I was sort of kind of pissed that was that's what we were getting, because even though I liked it, it felt like it was like a music dump, right? Here's everything he was working on, y'all. Boom. I'd rather have something along the lines of what we got from Phife and the Tribe Called Quest, Pun, right? with Yeah Baby, I'd rather have a project like Machiavelli, like something that this artist was currently working on this project. Because even though posthumous albums are hit or miss, right? Because the artist isn't here to see it through. You don't know if their entire vision is there, like Pop Smoke, right? And you can only hope that the person who picks up the mantle to executive produce it will do right by it, will make you feel like, put it this way, you would hope that executive producer can fulfill the vision of the artist for their album. And to see this, coming from Prodigy, it's really good news. Now, does that mean it's going to be dope? Does that mean it's going to be hot? Does that mean it's going to be anything like we would think because we miss Prodigy, right? What's the first thing you think of? You're thinking of Mobb Deep style. I mean, Prodigy was into a lot of Illuminati talk and stuff like that. It could be another one of those. Whatever the case may be, I can't wait. I hope they don't stick a bunch of. I know Prodigy recorded with a lot of dudes. When you look at these mixtapes with these features, he's recording with everybody. But because the man ain't here, we need the Thun rap, all right? Just want the Duns. Put the Duns on there, put Havoc on there, throw Nas on there. Nas, don't talk about him in the past tense. Act like y'all just made the song together. We all know he's gone. Because sometimes with the posthumous albums, that kind of takes away from what the music is when it becomes more of a memorial thing, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But I'd rather there be like an album of music that was worked on as if it was real time, and then at the very end, there's that goodbye song, so to speak. So we'll see what we get, but it's dope news to hear. My prediction was that we would get a Mobb Deep album of some sort in 2022. We'll see, because this announcement of a Prodigy solo joint, I didn't see that one coming. So we'll know. And lastly, of course, New York City marks late rapper Biggie Smalls, a.k.a. the Notorious B.I.G. 50th birthday with several ceremonies, but most importantly, a proclamation of him being officially the King of New York. Mayor Eric Adams of New York City said this, and I quote, "He was able to turn pain into purpose. He used his music to define what was happening in everyday life." Biggie's son, C.J. Wallace, had this to say about his father. "Ever since I was 14, 15, when I really had to realize how important this family legacy was, I made it my life. This is all I can do. I can't go a day without thinking about who my father is and the impact that he was able to make, and it inspires me to continue to do the same." So these quotes are coming from a ceremony of sorts that they had on Thursday. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Where the Biggie's son was presented with a proclamation from the mayor from the city of New York, recognizing how Biggie has changed music in the landscape of hip hop. And Biggie's birthday is actually Saturday, May 21st. 219 is when my mama wore the birth. You know what it is. Obviously, I'm from Brooklyn. And some may say, of course you're this excited. I'm from the 90s. And some would say, of course you're excited. But the thing about that is that Biggie is my favorite rapper of all time. And he wasn't always. I used to, flip-flop because it depends. I've been listening to hip-hop for a while, so it depends on the time, right? For a long time, Slick Rick was my favorite. Then Big Daddy Kane was my favorite of all time. Then Redman was my favorite MC of all time. Ice Cube. But when Biggie came out, and some of it does have to do with where I'm from. I grew up on Gates Avenue between Lewis and Stuyvesant. few blocks down from where Biggie grew up, but nevertheless, harder Bed-Stuy. And it was just something about him, right? And everybody would say Biggie's charming, and that, I think he expressed that in his music. He was extremely relatable, even if you weren't from Brooklyn. He celebrated life. He documented his struggles. And I tell people all the time, like, off Ready to Die, Everyday Struggle is my favorite track. I wasn't pushing weight. I wasn't going OT. You know, I don't have those stories. I didn't sell drugs. But I know plenty of people who had that same story. And it was the sincerity in his verses, in his voice, in that song that made it so I understood where he was coming from. Obviously, it's not that hard to understand, you know, your friends getting murdered and you selling drugs for a reason because you're poor. And when you take a song like that from Biggie, and then you look at his life story, whether you watch Notorious or one of the documentaries, especially the documentary his mother did on Netflix, that really gives you an idea of who Biggie was as a person. He was really trying to survive. And I remember Puff talking about how, you know, he had met Biggie, he had heard him, he was going to sign him, but it was taking some time, and Biggie was on edge because it had been months. I think it was something crazy, like 6 months since he was up in there rapping for Diddy. And he was so close to just getting back in the streets because he was trying to believe in this dream of rapping, believe that it could possibly take him out of his situation. And he was at a crossroads. And I feel like a song like Everyday Struggle kind of gives you that vibe of where he was in that moment in time. And what's dope about it is the fact that there are a number of rappers, there are a number of people who can relate to that, right? Like where you have a job opportunity that you know, if you get this job, it's going to solve a lot of your problems, right? It's going to solve some financial problems for you. I mean, you could be working a job currently where you don't have benefits, and now you're about to get this upgrade in pay plus benefits and stock options. At some point, you don't care what the job is. You just know I need that because it's going to change the course of my life in some way. And we're not just talking about being rich. We're just talking about being better off than you were. Now, I'm going to church on it and all of that. But I just wanted to express on a deeper level, besides the beats and the bars, why I like Biggie Small so much. He was killed at the age of 24. For those way older than 24, think about that. Think about where you were in your life. Same thing with Tupac. Us who were, around during that time, we forget how young they were. Tupac did a lot in his time, but Biggie wasn't, he kind of just got started, so to speak. In a lot of ways similar to Nipsey, right? But Biggie was already extremely popular by the time he was murdered. Nipsey's stock was rising fast when he was murdered. So I think it's a great thing on the 50th birthday of Biggie for New York City to recognize him. And there's a bunch of different things happening, right? Lil' Kim's having a black tie event. They had an event at Empire State Building. The Metro cards put out like a limited edition, a Biggie joint. I don't know who still use Metro cards, but whatever. Also, there's like a lot of artwork and murals. And it's just so dope to see because when you come from a time where hip hop was a thing that the kids did, and it wasn't the number one genre, and most people older than us or that lack knowledge only saw it as this derogative art form. And they never like looked at songs like The Message and Rapper's Delight as being a part of the same art form. They only looked at the hardcore lyrics. But the hardcore lyrics spoke out about the conditions that these artists grew up in. Poverty, police brutality, all these things that people are still flabbergasted that they happen. They've been happening forever and they continue even to this day. So happy birthday to the one and only Biggie Smalls from one of your biggest fans. That's going to do it for me for this week. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at VegasWorldINC. And subscribe to this podcast. Review this podcast if you're on Apple Podcasts. But most importantly, share this podcast with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, I am not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.